Marketer of the Day, number 465. Launch a successful coaching business, increase your monthly income, and streamline your productivity with Coach Marc Mawhinney. Hey everyone, we're glad you listened, and we have Marc Mawhinney with us today. It's the Marc Mawhinney Show. Now, Marc is a lifelong entrepreneur, and he's on a mission to help coaches build successful businesses, and he achieves this with his coaching programs, his podcast, Natural Born Coaches, his Facebook group called The Coaching Jungle, and his exclusive print newsletter called SecretCoachClub.com. So we're going to hear about all of his dirty little secrets. So how are things today, Mr. Marc?
I'm doing really good. Thanks for having me, Robert.
I'm glad to have you. So when we talk about creating a coaching business, like what does that look like exactly as far as like clients and the day-to-day and stuff like that?
Well, it looks different probably for every coach because it's one of those things that there's no two coaching businesses that are exactly alike. And that's what I love about it. You can customize it to fit your lifestyle and what you want to do, how much you want to work and all that stuff. I mean, I could speak for me in particular with my business it's a split between obviously coaching clients. A lot of it is podcast interviews. So I've got 2 podcasts, but then I'm also going out on shows like this one. And there's an awful lot of content creation. I'm big on content creation and, getting your message out there. So I do spend a lot of time writing, shooting videos and all that fun stuff.
Well, great. And I'm curious about a lot of that stuff because it seems like with a lot of this, with this coaching business stuff, there's a lot of doing the things that drive the machine that maybe don't appear to be making money on the outside at first glance. Like when you do some of those outreach calls or you put out the blog posts or put out the content or do the podcast interviews, things like that. Maybe those are things that maybe you don't see return on money instantly, but if you stop doing them, then your coaching business would dry up. So can you kind of tell us about that, about maybe like sometimes doing these things that don't appear to make money immediately?
Yeah, it's one of those tricky things because I work specifically with coaches. So really I'm a business coach and those are the people I'm helping, different types of coaches. And it's frustrating for people because humans by nature are impatient, or most humans are, and they want to do something and then see the result right away. And this business doesn't work like that. A lot of businesses don't work like that. So you could be doing something today that results in a client in 6 months, down the road, but you don't see it until then. Now, one thing I do find is it's that consistent action after a while shouldn't take you that long to really get it rolling. So, for example, with me, when I started my podcast, it was a daily show for the first 300 episodes, which it's now scaled back to a weekly show. I could do that, but for the first 300 days, I released a show every single day. And I would say it took about 30 days to start seeing the traction from that. Now I do daily emails to my list. I've been doing that for a couple of years. Same thing. It took about 30 days to see the results of doing something daily. So you don't want to do what a lot of people do. They try something for a couple of days. Let's say Facebook Live. They do 3 or 4 Facebook Lives in a row. And then they think, oh, well, I didn't get any clients from it. This doesn't work. So I'm off to the next bright, shiny object. And you can't be doing that either. That's dangerous. So you got to give it enough time for those seeds to finally sprout out.
And so do you have any secrets on the sort of being consistent and persistent in order for those things to make traction? Like, do you prefer to use a calendar? Do you set time aside for certain things to keep those things going, or does it kind of come naturally?
Well, I mean, the first secret, I don't know if it's much of a secret, but it's to choose things that you love doing. Take, for example, if you absolutely hate writing, you're not going to stick with daily emails to your list because you hate writing. If you hate shooting videos, you're not going to be terribly excited about doing Facebook Lives or YouTube videos consistently. So the first thing to do is find out what things you enjoy doing and then focus on doing that. Don't try to do things that you hate or you're just not going to stick with it. I'm a really big fan of batching for productivity. So batching is when you take certain blocks of time and you dedicate it to one task. So for a long time when my podcast was daily, I batched all the interviews into Tuesdays. It got a little crazy. I was doing 10 or 12 interviews in a row on a Tuesday because it was a daily show and I always wanted to stay ahead of the curve. But I knew that, okay, Tuesdays for podcast interviews. And I knew that Monday was for coaching clients, and I had Fridays, which I've now done is I block Fridays off for no calls on Fridays, and I keep that for content creation days, so I can get my head screwed on tight and know that okay, Fridays for content creation and catching my breath, with that. So there's a few tips.
Okay, well, great. And so, and I really like. I mean, I think that there's a lot of things in here that you said that are really interesting to me for a number of reasons. One is because this show right now is a 5-day or 5-episode a week podcast, and I'm thinking about scaling it back. As far as the daily emails, I myself have sent an email just about every weekday and some on weekends for about 12 and a half years. So I can definitely relate to a lot of these things that, like you said, like things that make money, but also you enjoy doing, have somehow stuck. And I'm looking to kind of do like ride that train more. And I'm sure a lot of people listening would love to have basically like a Monday to do this, a Tuesday to do this, a Friday to do that kind of thing. And right now I do the podcast interviews Monday and Tuesday, but I would love to have one day for just the meeting with coaching clients, one day for just the writing, one day for going out there on other podcasting shows. But then I keep, I don't know, driving myself crazy trying to figure out the calendar, the schedule. And so in order to get what you have right now, as far as like what you do on your, like you have that Friday day and things like that, did that come about naturally? Did you do it one way and then it evolved a different way? Like how did you land on, say, doing those 10 or 12 interviews all in one day, things like that?
Well, a lot of it was trial and error. So luckily I don't have to do as many podcast interviews now where it's not a daily show. It's much more manageable. But well, I'll tell you about a recent change that I made here. A perfect example of changing your schedule. I used to put all my coaching calls, or the vast majority of them, on Mondays. And what was happening was my Mondays were just filled up where it was back-to-back calls, and I was getting a little bit run down from it. Sunday night would come and I would look at my schedule for the next day. I'm like, oh my God, I'm on calls from 9 a.m. till 9 p.m. And it doesn't really help you get your week off to a good start. And I was talking to a couple coaches who I know in Hawaii, and great coaches, Kimmy Morton and Pua, who have Your Best Life Ever podcast. And of course, Hawaii's got a little bit different vibe than a lot of places, right? It's a little bit more relaxed, but they're still serious about business, just they're a little more relaxed. And Kimmy and Pua told me that they take off their Mondays, they block off, they don't book calls. So they're still working, but they're just setting up their week, and they're taking care of other things. They're not going on back-to-back calls. So just recently I started doing that with my Mondays, and for the most part, I've been sticking to it. Now, you and I are recording this on a Monday, so obviously I will do the odd call with it, but I'm not doing 10 calls in a row anymore. And it makes it a little bit busier between Tuesday and Thursday, because now my Monday and Fridays, I'm not booking calls, but it's still definitely manageable. And I found that one change was huge. I just was much more relaxed. My weeks went better, and it just didn't seem to be as much of a rush having Monday blocked off from calls.
Interesting. That's a pretty good insight. And I've noticed that when I set the certain hours for those slots for the podcast for on a Monday or a Friday, I definitely get a little shy when things get into 1 p.m., 2 p.m. because I definitely want to avoid what you're doing there. But now I might even throw out Mondays altogether, or just try mixing things up in there. And then, so, I mean, even with you scaling back, do you make it, or have you found a sweet spot as far as like an optimal number of time on the calendar or things on the calendar? Like, do you prefer like to go on like X number of other people's shows every week to meet some sort of a quota, anything like that?
Yeah, well, I'm a big fan of going on other shows. So general rule of thumb, I'm doing any 1 to 2 interviews on other people's podcasts a week. Lately, it's been 2 or 3, it seems like, every week. So that is something that I definitely have a quota for. One thing that's really helped is I've gotten a lot tighter who I'll hop on, say, Skype with. So I've been in this coaching game now for 4 years, going into my 5th year. And in the early days, I would hop on with pretty much anybody. I used to have my calendar, my scheduling link blasting out on Twitter every so often. And I had some people who I shouldn't have been talking to. There's some real nut bars that were connecting with me. But I wasted hundreds of hours a year on those. Or, these people that want these, quote, getting to know you calls, which are often thinly veiled, either brain picking sessions or trying to sell you something. And then you spend an hour on a line with them. So I did a few things. I cut down my blocks of time when people are booking calls with me down to 30 minutes instead of an hour, which means we get right down to business a lot quicker. But then I also have them jump over some hurdles. So if you go to my website, you'll see there's an application form for a call. And if someone's not willing to fill that form out, great. That saved me a lot of time because they probably weren't very serious. Or if there's something in that answer that I don't like in one of those questions, and it raises some red flags, I don't do the call. So I actually have a lot fewer time-wasting calls. So even though I've compressed my calendar to keep Mondays and Fridays mostly blocked off as Marc time, I'm not working crazy hours Tuesday to Thursday because I'm not wasting my time with these, like I said, brain-picking calls or sales calls when people are trying to sell me something.
Right, so you're putting in less time, but it's better time to be put in. And I mean, do you wish that you had done that from the beginning? Like, do you wish that you'd sort of screen people with an application on these calls beforehand, or do you like that you were able to get all kinds of a mix of people to kind of get toughened up in that way?
Yeah, I think hindsight's 2020. So if you're playing Monday morning quarterback, it's easy to say, "Oh, I should have been doing this on day one and that on day one," but you kind of have to get beat up a little bit, I think, to learn that lesson. And that's what a lot of I tell new coaches that feel bad about this. They think, "Oh God, I've been doing it this way for my first 6 months," and I say, "Hey, look, that just shows you how you don't want to do it going forward. It reinforces that lesson." So it's not actually a bad thing. It shows you what you don't want to do. And I'm constantly optimizing my schedule and different things for my business. So I'll be making changes every year. My business will change. It'll grow and evolve because you don't know certain things now. You're going to get connected with someone 2 years down the road that blows your mind with some hack. I guess I hate that word, but some business hack that you can implement, and it can make things a lot easier for you.
Right, I completely agree, and that's really reassuring. And I can relate to that in that, sometimes you get these tips or you hear about things that you should be doing, and it's really overwhelming. But if you just do a couple of those things, then I feel like then now I'm ready to receive the next sort of insight, the next thing that blows my mind. But I wouldn't have been properly positioned for that if I hadn't made those kinds of mistakes that you're mentioning. And so that's super helpful. And so we mentioned a few times that you're the coach for coaches, and you mentioned a little bit that you had someone come to you. So can you tell us like an interesting story? You have a great case study or a before and after of someone who came to you and things were really a mess and you went in and worked your magic and made things super great?
Well, I'd like to say every single one of my clients are making multiple six figures a year. I won't be like the majority of people online. There's one or two people who bullshit, and that's what they say. But I mean, I'll give you a perfect example. A client of mine, this was interesting because I worked with someone who, I don't work with many people local here on the East Coast of Canada. I don't even advertise locally. I like working virtually with people all over, and that's how I don't want to be stuck in my sandbox, right? I want to work with people all over. But I did work with a local client a few years back who was in a 9-to-5 job, and she wanted to become a coach. And that was her dream, to make the jump from 9 to 5 to full-time coaching. And she wasn't sure if she could do it. And I worked with her directly one-on-one, and she got great traction. And she was able to quit her job and go into coaching full-time in a couple months from us starting. And I could tell you that she was the happiest person alive probably when she made that jump, to get into coaching full time. And it seems like a lot of the coaches I work with are ones who are moving from 9 to 5 into coaching full time. And I'm always the happiest person when they have, I call it their Independence Day. That's the day when they have their Jerry Maguire moment and they tell their boss, "Okay, I'm done. I'm leaving." I don't know if you remember Jerry Maguire when he took the goldfish or whatever out of the tank and said, "Who's with me?" when he's quitting.
Oh yeah.
That when they have those kind of days, nothing as dramatic as Tom Cruise and Jerry Maguire, but when they have those days, I'm very happy for them.
So what's the thought process on that like? Like if someone says they have a 9 to 5, they want to get this coaching business going, like how does that sort of process work? Do you say, well, you need X number of dollars and then based on that you need Y number of clients, or like how does that planning work with a person?
Yeah, well, one thing that I'm really clear on when I start working with a person like that is not to get their expectations too high. So you see a lot of Facebook ads out there, and a lot of these gurus are promising you can quit your job in 3 days. You're going to make $1 million, right? And you're going to be able to work 5 minutes a day ongoing and all this stuff. I tell them, hey, this is going to be a lot of work. And there's no right or wrong answer for when you should transition out of your job. But I'm not opposed to keeping your job while you're building your coaching business on the side. That's actually what I did when I did a sales job with a telecommunications company when I started coaching. And it was a home-based position and very flexible, which was great, but it wasn't my passion. And I kept that while I was building up coaching. And then once coaching surpassed my income from the sales job, I jumped, full time. But a lot of people are looking to hit that home run right out of the gate, and then they get frustrated and they get kind of dejected. I don't think there's anything wrong with trying to hit a single or a double before you work your way out of your 9 to 5. It's going to take a little bit of time. Now, don't make a 10-year plan. If you have a 10-year goal, that's too long. But there's nothing wrong with saying, hey, I want to be out of my job in 6 months or 12 months, something like that. Because there's nothing worse than if you quit your job and then you need a client tomorrow as a coach, and then you got to take on anybody, probably for peanuts, just to get some money coming in. And you're going to be really resentful there too. So there's nothing wrong with hanging on to that 9 to 5 until you really get coaching going, or any business for that matter.
Yeah, I completely agree. And what I love about that idea of sticking with both for a while is, at least for me, it taught me time management really quick. Because at first I thought I would quit and then I'd have 8 to 10 hours a day freed up of doing whatever I want. But then what I realized really quickly was that if I was able to get both going, and I was able to spend, one to maybe on a packed day, maybe only 1 to 2 hours on the business, but if I had a really good time management, that maybe 4 or 5 hours. And then by the time I was able to quit my job, it was great because now I had all this extra time during the day to do other stuff, to think, to strategize. But by just having those few focused hours, I'm so glad I figured out how to get that focused and how to get that single tasking and all that figured out. Because otherwise, I mean, who knows what it would have happened if I had kind of quit too early in that scenario you mentioned.
Yeah, it's really disorienting when you go from a 9 to 5 to suddenly you have all those free hours, because in your mind you think, oh, I'm going to be working every single minute of 80 hours a week. And we know that's not going to happen. People may say they're working 80 hours a week, but if you dissect it and look at what they're actually doing between surfing, YouTube, and Facebook and everything else, it's not 80 hours. So I think that what you said is great. It does teach you to really focus and get that done. And I know plenty of coaches and online entrepreneurs who are able to do both, but they're able to do the 9 to 5 and they're able to build their other business in the evenings or early mornings. But those are the type of people that can get more done with, say, 20 hours a week than some other people could get done with 60 or 80.
Right, and that circles back a little bit to what we were saying a few minutes ago about how you used to put in tons of time, tons of hours doing all these things, but after a while you figured out where to focus, where to optimize. And so when you're working with someone to get their coaching business rocking and rolling, what sort of ingredients need to be set up? Like, do they need like a website, a way to schedule these calls, to get the appointments? Do they need like consistent content? Like, what sort of things do you help someone set up so that way they have the right pieces in place for this?
Well, they need all those things that you mentioned. But first and foremost, they need to have a clear idea who they're helping and how they're helping them. So a lot of people jump out there and they're not really clear and they don't even have an offer. That's something that's really important. I say ABO. That's an acronym I coined for always be offering. I had a call recently with a woman who hasn't made a cent yet online, but she's invested a lot of money in online stuff to get her business going. And when I asked her, okay, well, what are you offering? And she kind of danced around it a bit, and she was working on some membership site or something. But I said, but what are you offering? What are you putting out there? She said, well, nothing yet. And it had been like a year or something. Well, if you don't have something out there, obviously it's common sense. People can't buy anything. So before all the fancy, flashy websites and stuff like that, you have to be clear on what you're doing, and you have to create a compelling offer. Then you take the next step where you hammer people over the head with that offer. You have engaging content. You show that you know what you're talking about, but you're always putting that offer out there. And that's what I do when I'm promoting something. I'm constantly talking about it. So the last week of every month, for example, before my Secret Coach Club print newsletter goes to the printer, I'm talking about that. I'm sure people are sick of hearing about it. I'm talking about it so much in social media and to my email list, but it's really important to reinforce that. You can't just post something once a week and expect that to be enough. It's a really noisy, crowded online marketplace, and you have to really make sure that you're getting your offers out there.
Okay, great. And I think that, I mean, what you said there, I mean, it seems simple, but so true that so many people either don't have an offer or they're still quote unquote working on it. So, I mean, great stuff right there. And so, like when you say that you're promoting an offer and things like that, I mean, is it just the Secret Coach Club, or like, do you change it up like every week or every month, or like what sorts of offers are we talking here?
Well, I do have just a few main things. So often the first half of the month, I'll be pushing something else. Like let's say my group program, I do a lot of group coaching. So I may talk about that a lot the first few weeks of a month. And then it's the last half of the month, I talk more about the print newsletter where it's getting closer to going to print. Or maybe the first half of the month, I'm talking about some sort of joint venture I'm doing. You know, I'm doing a joint webinar with somebody, an affiliate type thing. I may do that as well. So I think it's good to have a couple offerings for people, but don't go too far and have 30 different choices. I've seen some people that need spreadsheets to track what they're offering, and it's just way too much. And, you know, the old examples, Apple, when Steve Jobs came back to take over, they were offering, I forget what the number was, a couple hundred different products or whatever, and he trimmed it down to a handful because they were just spread out all over the place. So for me, it's very simple. I've got my one-on-one coaching, my group coaching, I've got the print newsletter that I was talking about, and then my online do-it-yourself programs. And those are the only things that I have. Very simple menus, kind of like, I don't know, Five Guys and In-N-Out Burger. I think it has a pretty basic menu too, if I'm not mistaken. You're in California, you'd know better than I.
Yeah, we have both of those.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, unfortunately, we don't here. And anytime I travel to a place that has one of those, I have to go check it out. Like I just say, screw the gym. I'm close to an In-N-Out Burger or close to a Five Guys. I'm going to go. But yeah, that's the thing. Like, don't have too many offerings. And I've seen an awful lot of coaches and online entrepreneurs. If you ask them, well, what do you have? How can I work with you, for example? And they're like deer caught in headlights. And then they're like, well, let me see. And we've got 25 different choices here. Let's see what fits best for you. It's way too many choices, and people are going to be just, their eyes will glaze over and they'll move on. It's going to be very hard to sell them.
So what's the answer to that for those of us that, because like I have a ton of products, and I kind of look at a lot of those as lead gen, as I'm building a buyer's list, stuff like that. So do you recommend that those of us who have a ton of products, that we retire those, phase them out, or like, what are your thoughts on that?
No, I think the online programs, the hands-off stuff, you can get away with that. And I assume that's what you mean.
Yes.
Is it? Yeah. So, I mean, I have 2 full-scale online programs, and I've got a couple on Udemy that are shorter type ones, and I'll be launching a new one in the new year. You can have 20 online programs because you're not actually delivering those. I'm referring more to coaches who they'll say something like, well, you can work with me one-on-one, where this option we do 1 call a week for an hour, four calls a month. This one we meet every 2 weeks for 25 minutes. And this one we meet 3 times a month for 40 calls per minute. And then I'll do email support with this one, but not with that one. If you want, we'll do this one where, it's just on and on and on, and it's way too much. So I'm referring a little bit more to probably the coaching model with that. Online programs, I think it's great as long as the ones you have are selling. So if you're just creating a new online program every few months, you don't have time to really hammer at it and get it sold, I don't think that that's really good. I'm generally launching a new online program once a year.
Okay, fair enough. So don't just launch for the heck of it, and
Yeah.
that makes a lot of sense as far as the one-on-one stuff, because I've definitely seen that and just been totally confused and took one look at that and thought, okay, well they're probably not selling any because there's six different choices and it's all very like mechanical and time based, and I'm just like thinking, if it was just one offer or maybe two, then I could just look at it and be like, well, I'll buy that and I won't necessarily use the whole 45 minutes or I won't use that part of it. But yeah, definitely that makes a lot of sense that as far as offering some kind of one-on-one or group thing, don't have a bunch of options for that. And so as you're mentioning some of these different like, ways to do coaching programs and you have some of these clients, do you have any like interesting, I don't know, like interesting niches that some of these coaches are in?
Well, a lot of the people I work with are in business related niches, but there are some that are in other ones. So I had a client recently in one of my group programs who's really big on the health coaching world, and he's got a good sized tribe, nice Facebook group going, and he's doing things more like meal plans and helping people with their health stuff. So hey, that's great. I'm working with someone currently who's a breakup coach for men. So men, women are a little bit more willing to ask for help from their friends if they're going through a breakup. They're willing to accept support. And what do us guys do? We say, "Oh no, we're fine, we're totally fine." But the guy's sitting there with his curtains probably closed, and he's drinking vodka in bed at 2 in the afternoon, crying about a breakup or something like that. And this client's actually helping men get through this with what he's doing. So that's what I love about the coaching world, is that there's so many different choices. I mean, there's not just one way that you can make a go at it. I actually heard a funny story recently from someone in my Facebook group. She said that there was someone who is an ex-stripper who is a mindset coach for strippers, which
Crazy.
I couldn't believe. I was like, oh my God, I'd never heard of that, but hey, whatever floats your boat. And supposedly she's doing really well with it. So it just goes to show you that you can really do anything. There's almost any niche imaginable here with coaching.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like fun to be able to jump into someone else's business and see things they don't see and apply some of your internet marketing or your business stuff, especially if maybe they don't even know what they're sitting on. If they have a huge list or like that Facebook group or a huge following, for you just to be able to give them that strategy or just plug things in here. And we're kind of starting to get near the tail end of our conversation here, but I saw on your one sheet that one of the things that you talk about is increasing your fees and charging what you're worth. And I know that, we all have this problem. And right now I only have one coaching client at the moment, but when I see people with their coaching clients, they're only charging like a couple $100 a month instead of the thousands that they should be charging. So do you have advice or any kind of a pep talk for those of us to tell us to increase our fees, and if we've increased them, increase them even more and charge what we're worth?
Yeah, I hate to see that as well. What you mentioned, when you see coaches charging $100 or $200 for one-on-one per month, and I'm thinking, oh man, just peanuts. What I would say, the toughest person to convince isn't anyone out there in the marketplace. It's the man or woman in the mirror. So once you convince yourself that you're worth it, it's much easier. So a good example here, this past summer, my fees are already well above industry average, but I said, you know what, I should be bumping my fees up. And I bumped them up 33% across the board. And my gut had been telling me that for a couple months before that, but I delayed, and I said, well, no, I'm already charging enough. But my gut kept saying, no, Mark, you should be charging more. And the cool thing is, the more you charge, the clients are more committed, more invested in the relationship. They'll do more of the work. They'll treat it more seriously. Compared to if you're working for free or peanuts, they're just not treating it seriously because people don't value what they're getting for free. And I absolutely hate to see coaches say, well, I'm going to coach for free for a while just to get experience. Then I'll start charging. Meanwhile, their confidence is taking a hit. They're getting bitter, resentful because they're not making any money. And it's bad for the coach. It's bad for the client. It's bad for everyone. So I would challenge anyone listening here today, if you know in your heart and in your head that your fees are too low, just go in and edit your pricing wherever it's at. It's not going to be as hard as you think. And then you just be totally confident when you're presenting it. So A funny story I'll share quickly. There's a coach that I know who I think he doubled his fees or something like that. He was really scared to death to do it, but he said, I'm going to do it. It might have even been like tripled or quadrupled. It was something crazy for him. And he was on a Skype call with a potential client. And it was Skype audio, by the way, not video. And when they got to that part of the conversation where they talked about fees, the guy said, okay, how much is it to hire you? And this coach shot out this new fee. And he literally put his fist in his mouth to keep himself from saying anything. Because the urge that people have with that is they would shoot the price out, but then they would try to justify it, or they would backpedal or whatever. And he said that he literally had teeth marks in his hand. It was the longest 20 seconds of his life the guy took to answer him. And the guy said, sure, let's do it. And he's like, oh my God. But that's how tough it is for coaches. This is a guy that just shoved his fist right in his mouth to keep himself from saying anything, to shoot himself down with this new pricing. But it worked. So just get out there and do it. I would challenge anyone listening, increase your prices ASAP.
I love it. And I like your thought process there, in that, I mean, what I've heard from you is, number one, it's just a number. So it's not some big, huge, life-changing thing. You just go into your web pages and change the number on the page, change the number on the button. And then number two, what I heard is, try the price out there. Because, I mean, and even the way that you laid it out there, I mean, it seems silly to not increase our prices for those people who are like afraid to increase it, and you run all these scenarios in your head. Why not increase it and then put the price out there, and then get the feedback from there, as opposed to just the feedback in your head?
Oh, exactly. You have to be totally confident with it, because prospects have very finely tuned radars. So if you're not 100%, if you're only 70, 80% confident, they will pick up on it. So it's a bit of a mind game. You have to kind of trick yourself. Not saying that you're not worth it. You're worth it, but you do have to trick that little voice in your mind, push it away, and because it's going to try to sabotage you.
Yeah, I completely agree, and you're so right about that. And it's nothing to be messed around with. It's always easy to kind of laugh things off and say, oh well, I have low self-esteem or something like that. But I mean, if you let that low self-esteem voice kind of be in the driver's seat and take you where you want to go, that's not a good place to be. So sort of along those lines a little bit, as we're getting wound down here, after you said you're entering your 5th year of coaching, and you coach different coaches to do things, do you see like a number one mistake being made by coaches all over the place these days?
Oh, that's tough too. How much time do we have?
Oh, geez. Open a can of worms.
Well, one of the issues that I'm really seeing is that they're not treating it like a quote real business, and because it is deceiving. You know, with a coaching business that you're doing from home, you don't have that physical office space that you're getting dressed up to go into the office every day, and you don't have customers and clients walking through the doors and all that. You could be working in pajama pants and slippers with a bowl of Cheerios next to you on a dining room table or something like that to build your business. So it doesn't always feel real. But I find that goes to a big issue that coaches have. They just don't take their time seriously, like we talked about before. And I was guilty of it. My first year, I wasted hundreds of hours on these calls that were just time-wasting calls. And that was my mistake. I learned the hard way, but I corrected it. So just because you don't have physical office space and probably not physical staff and all that other stuff doesn't mean that you aren't a business. You are a real business. And unfortunately, I'd say maybe 20% of online entrepreneurs are actual serious entrepreneurs. I'd say at least 80% are more entrepreneurs. They're just not serious. They don't treat it seriously, and that's why they're not doing very well with it.
Well, shoot. Well, scary stuff. And I definitely agree with that, in that as soon as I started treating it like a real business, and I said, I'm going to put in, this number of hours, I'm going to make sure to stay on the ball as far as whatever like forms I need, whatever accounting stuff. As soon as I started treating it seriously, suddenly everything became a lot simpler. Imagine that. So if people are listening here and they want to make, and they love everything they've heard so far, and they want to know all about you, and they want to get on your list and check out your offers and buy everything you have, where should they go to do that?
Well, the best spot is naturalborncoaches.com. That's the main site. Also, I spend a lot of time in my Facebook group. I've got almost 10,000 coaches in there. It's called the Coaching Jungle. So if you go to thecoachingjungle.com, that'll forward to the Facebook group.
Super fantastic. So the Coaching Jungle to get to that Facebook group, and then Natural Born Coaches to check out Marc's podcast, his website. And then is there like a way for someone to join your list or sign up for a freebie or something?
Yeah, well, I mean, naturalborncoaches.com, there's a free ebook there that's the real ABCs of a successful coaching business. That'll get you onto my list if you opt in for that. The other thing I'll say, I have a solo podcast, and you can get on my list there as well. It's themarcshow.com, and that's Marc with a C, themarcshow.com. I've got an infographic there now about content creation. So it's called How to Become a Content Creation Machine. And that shows you how I come up with all the content that I come up with. So you can get onto my list at either of those sites.
Super great. So Natural Born Coaching to get the ABCs of a successful coaching business, and then the Marc Show, Marc with a C, so that's TheMarcshow.com to claim that infographic on how to become a content creation machine. Sounds like that's super important as far as getting all those leads into the funnel and getting them on some calls and getting them booked as coaching clients or as students or for whatever. So lots of great stuff for us to think about and chew on today. Natural Born Coaches, the Coaching Jungle, and the marcshow.com. So we'll see you on those websites. Make sure to check them out, sign up for Marc's list, and so that way you can hear about the latest and greatest stuff he has going on. And thanks so much, Marc, for stopping by and sharing some of these great stories and insights and just some pretty good advice today.
Yeah, thanks, Robert.
Don't wait for perfection. Don't spend more than 1 hour at a time at the computer. Don't do more than 4 things per day, and don't let projects take longer than 3 days. These are just some of the insights you'll discover in our new book, The Checklist Mindset. Claim your copy at www.checklistmindset.com right now today.